This video is about document structure and how we can make our Google Docs more accessible whenever they are being read or used in a digital platform. So we're going to really talk about heading structure. That's the primary consideration we want to think about when we are crafting Google Docs that we're sharing. When we are considering heading structure, we want to think about using the Styles menu. So that appears right here. When we open a new document, it generally defaults to normal text. And we oftentimes our typical pattern has been to just format the text using our formatting tools. But that doesn't apply then a structure to the document. It treats everything equally. And if I am somebody who relies on a screen reader, navigating that document is much more difficult. I can't skip through sections the way somebody who doesn't rely on a screen reader could. So I want to make sure I'm relying on those heading structures. What they do is they serve as navigation landmarks for screen reader users. And it helps to reveal the structure. As you'll notice, because I've used headers, all of that structure appears over here in my document tab menu. The other nice thing is by using heading styles rather than just relying on the formatting tools is once I do format it, so this normal text has been changed. It's Arial size 14. And if I notice also in my document I have text here that looks like regular content, but it doesn't match its style. If I decide this is the style that I want all of my normal text to look like, Arial 14 with no additional formatting, I can go in to normal text and say update normal text to match. And when I do that, all the normal text that's on the page will match this style. So now this text that wasn't normal text before now is. And so it was really quick to be able to update that text. The second thing we're going to talk about is a screen reader understands that special code, and it can skip around and navigate based in two different ways. It can either skip to going from next or previous heading with the keyboard shortcut, or a screen reader could bring a list up of all of the headings and would allow the user to select a section heading to start reading from that point. But that only works if the headings have been properly assigned styles. So the next thing we want to think about is we want to make sure that we are using a consistent design so that when the screen reader reads it, it's reading in order. So we wouldn't want to skip a heading. We wouldn't want to say, oh, I want this to be heading 1 and this to be heading 3. We really want to make sure we're using those in a logical sequential order, like in an outline. The next thing that we are thinking about then are our links. We rely a lot on links in Google Docs, and one of the things that we want to make sure we're doing is ensuring that those links are descriptive. So we would avoid, say, using click here, or if we are putting a URL in there, we need to provide text for it. So I wouldn't just put the raw URL file. I would want to have text that's associated with it, and it should be descriptive. We also, if we are going to use images on a document, we need to provide those some alternative text. So for instance, if I, on this particular document, and I'm going to show this as kind of a before and after, this is an agenda that we used. This is one of the images that's on the page. When I click on it, and I also have this image on the page, when I look at it, if I go to image options, there's this little accessibility piece called alt text, notice that there is nothing in there. So when a screen reader reads that, it's just going to say graphic or image and won't give any kind of context to what that is. Sometimes we use images merely for decorative purposes, and we can identify that in the alt text as being just saying that it's a decorative image. But in this case, I would want to describe it. And so I'm going to describe and name this the Nebraska Digital Citizenship Symposium logo. If this was critical if like what's going on in that image is critical for understanding other content on the page, I would probably want to give it more descriptive information. But this serves its purpose. It's really only there to be a logo. So this now gets attached to that, and when a screen reader reads it, it will read this description. It'll say image, the Nebraska Digital Citizenship Symposium logo. And someone who has a visual impairment would then be able to know what that image is there for. We also want to think about on our docs, when we are publishing in a digital format, we want to take consideration in what size of font and what type of font we use. What you'll see on this screen is what we call a sans serif font. A sans serif font is a very basic font. It's very easy for people with visual impairments or for screen readers to read. We want to avoid using a lot of fancy fonts or fonts that have serif. So for instance, if I highlight this and instead of Arial, I pick something like the Berkshire Swash, notice that there's all sorts of additional pieces to create that font, and for some readers this would be difficult for them to read. So we want to keep our fonts pretty basic and very readable. Arial, Calibri, or Lexand are all good choices when we're thinking about publishing the majority of our content for font type. Body text in the digital, when we're delivering digital content, we want to think about 14 to 16 point. We oftentimes think of 12-point font as very readable, and that's perfectly acceptable for print. But for digital content, we want to think about using 14 to 16 point for body text, and our headers around 24 point or larger. We also like to use tables quite a bit to organize information. And for people who don't rely on screen readers, that's great. But a screen reader has a really hard time reading a table. So we want to limit our use of tables and use it really just to show data. Text can be data, but we want to make sure that the table is defined in such a way that the heading row is very clear, and the cells that fall under that header are associated with that header row very explicitly. We don't want to merge cells in a table that is hard for a screen reader to read, and it would not be able to then associate with an appropriate header column row or a header column. And then finally, as we consider using color in our online publications, we want to make sure we're following this color contrast rule so that we meet a 4.5 to 1 ratio. One of the tools that you can use to do that is called Adobe Color. And when we go to Adobe Color, you can put in the colors that you're using and the text color and the background color, and it will generate what ratio you're meeting and whether that passes or not. So for instance, in using our colors, if I wanted to make the page background, I'm going to just do a page setup, And I'm going to change the page color, and I'm going to use one of our colors from our style guide, and I'm going to make a custom color. And I know my hex code is I'm going to use the dark teal. I'm going to save that. And so now I have the dark teal and I've got black. I can come into this Adobe color and check to see if my background color, and I'm going to put that same background color in there. And I'm going to change this to black. Let's get this to black. And it says that that is an okay contrast. If I used white against that, notice how over here my contrast doesn't meet the 4.5 to 1. So we wouldn't want, it doesn't provide enough contrast for someone who might have a visual impairment to be able to read that well. So I would want to change that to black to meet the contrast ratio, and notice we get that contrast ratio here. So those are the big concepts that we want to think about with making our Google Docs accessible. I wanted to show you just 2 examples. So this first agenda that I showed you is a not accessible agenda. I've used a table. There are some links that have problems. My images don't have alternate text. So I'm going to show you what I did to make it more accessible. This is the same content, but I've changed the layout slightly. Each of my images now have alternative text. So when a screen reader reads it, it will read the alternative text. My heading, I have a heading structure now for each of the sections. And while I used a table before, I eliminated the table, but to give some visual appeal to the document, I chose to use some page, some shading, and I'll show you how to do that. When, rather than setting up a table, I just wrote and used heading 2 for this section of the agenda, and I am going to format it. I'm going to use paragraph styles, borders, and shading. And I selected a background color, and I am applying that. And so now I have a little bit of visual appeal for people who might be navigating it that don't have a visual impairment. I updated some of the links to be more descriptive, provided a link to that email address, and then did the same with this section down here in terms of the shading on that paragraph. So those are ways to make our digital content more accessible. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out, email me, or you can call me if you have questions. But I hope this will be helpful as you continue to improve your practice in making digital content.